Because it's not about support. I'm not calling for military intervention. I'm talking about support, sometimes moral support. In the past, the regimes used to think, and they were right, that they have the full support from the West to keep their regimes at any price, and to say all the time that the alternative is the Islamists. In the case of Syria, everyone here knows maybe that the Islamists or the fundamentalists actually were the product of the regime itself to be sent to Iraq. So it wasn't the product of the people, the ordinary people. What we are talking about when we talk about support from the West, to say that we disagree with what's happening with the atrocities there. Of course, the Syrian people made this obvious. We don't want Western forces to intervene, and we don't expect somebody like any country to do something like that. But not to give an excuse for the regime to believe that they are fighting the fundamentalists again, and that they are allowed to do whatever they want. I'm talking about the regime. So we need just to say moral support from the West, not military support. Thank you.
Freedom in Egypt is blasphemy. I can even count the number of people or activists I know that promote economic freedom in Egypt on one hand. There are so very few of us, it's amazing. Because we don't have any literature in Arabic that support economic freedom or market economy. We don't have these kind of literature. So when intellectuals that don't want to be Islamists become socialists, it's the only available literature in Egypt. And regarding Emmanuel's question, we can change the incentive for pushing for educational reform. The current educational reform teaches militancy, teaches intolerance. When I was a child at an even private school in Egypt, we were forced to study in in Arabic curricula militancy. We were studying the story of Aqba ibn Nafi', and that hacking necks and heads and limbs was justified if it's done for the correct reason. So that kind of education we received, and I received as a child. It's just horrifying. And regarding your comment, sir, I certainly disagree with what you said. The Muslim Brotherhood's former leader, Mahdi Aqif, stated on Egyptian television 2 months ago that Saudi Arabia pays them millions of dollars, and since both Saudi Arabia and Egypt are police states, you cannot perform these kinds of financial transactions without the support of the government. We cannot receive as an organization $1,000 without the regime's consent. They know where we're getting our funding and they approve of it to a certain degree. But if we exceed this, we will not be allowed to even breathe or live out of prison for one day. And the Muslim Brotherhood are not a moderate organization. They are a terrorist organization. They promote militancy and global war, and they are the founding fathers of Jama'ah al-Islamiyya and Al-Qaeda. And these are all facts, and we can debate this later on. Thank you.
You're sensitive on this, Islamic fundamentalism of the Muslim Brotherhood, but I would like to mention that actually Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamic movements are a historical fact throughout the Muslim world. We cannot get rid of them from evening to morning. They had a real, genuine reason to start up at the first place, because of the Western imperialism, military invasions, capturing of the oil by the outside sources, back of their dictatorships by the Western powers, etc., etc. So they had a genuine power, their reason to set up, so that they get deep-rooted over time, and they were able to survive despite the very terrible oppression by their own government. So instead of trying to getting rid of them, or instead of shutting down the doors, a better way to go is to get together, ask them for dialogue, get together, sit down on the table, and then try to analyze our problems. How can we produce solutions together? So, trying to establish a common ground and developing a dialogue with those guys would be a much better way. Otherwise, there will be survive. There will be, you know, an actor in the political realm of the Muslim world. And if you like, I urge you to review, to read the book written by Graham Fuller. He was talking about the future of political Islam. I translated into Turkish that book, and I urge you to the Arab guys, especially, you know, these trying to find get away with these people. It is a good, it gives an idea on how to deal with the Muslim or Islamic movements throughout the Muslim world.
And I referred him to a book which is very famous within the Sunni school, which named by Sharh Aqaid Nasafi, explanation of Nasafi theology. Sharh Aqaid al-Nasafi, very famous book. In the preamble of this book, it was mentioned in Arabic, I remember the text, لما حاولوا الإسلاميون الفلسفة من اليونانية إلى العربية, like this, a big part. And I convinced this big group of ulama that there is not only to look only to the Islamic text and the Islamic sources. Our great scholars at that time, they translated this philosophy from Greek to Arabic. It was acceptable to them, and after that they accepted to read these international instruments, at least to have a look on that. I think it's a good way. We can go back to this way, and it's possible. Yeah, in terms of women's rights, despite that I mentioned that we have right now thousands of civil society and non-governmental associations, most of them cover all of the country in terms of women's rights. But still we have problem with women's rights. Recently we had a research by the name of HTP, harmful traditional practices, which is very common in Afghanistan, like bad marriage. Bad marriage, someone kills someone, but the killer family should give to marriage 2-3 girls for the victim family. It's bad marriage, even they are in a matter of ages, in small age, underage. And also exchange marriage, other type of violations, beating of women, forcing women to work, like these things. And finally, the government adopted a law by the name of Elimination Violation Against Women Law, which is right now implementing by the judiciary sources. And but still, there are many challenges in this regard. The situation of women empowered in the main cities. In the rural area, still we have problem. There is a resolution by the Security Council by the name of 1325, which order political participation of women. And in terms of that, we have 65 women MPs in a small parliament, which we have 200. It has 248 members. It's unique comparing to neighboring countries. We have 65 female MPs. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. The question was about the role of Islam in Central Asia and about religious opposition. So the answer is also different because it depends on the country. For example, in Kyrgyzstan, I cannot remember an opposition Islamic party, although there are some nominal parties with separate names like Freedom, Free Kyrgyzstan, but some of the politicians are with other parties in the parliament, so sometimes they consider themselves as Muslims, or they publish it, they say it publicly. But in Kazakhstan there are some minor groups, and they are also very interesting. Like I've read a Muslim association or something, but they support democratic values, and they wanted our president to be a Nobel Prizer. And concerning Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, the situation is very, how to say, a bit problematic because in Tajikistan there was a civil war after 1990s, and with the involvement of Islamic parties. Tajikistan is the country where Islamic party is legalized, but right now the government is very afraid of the growth of Islamic movements and Muslims. So there are already some restrictions even to attending mosques, not only distributing leaflets or etc. And in Uzbekistan, the situation goes even further and even more problematic, because every time they, like in the country, there is no political opposition. People who are who don't support the Karimov's regime, for example, they want to be with somebody else. But when they want to be, they have the only option is with radical Muslim movements who don't stop their activity. And for example, they are being arrested. Whenever they go to prison, they continue the work, and they have more supporters in prisons, for example. So the problem is it might become very violent, because they work with uneducated people or who committed some crime previously. So in this case, the situation with Islamic movements or religious opposition are very interesting. Thank you.